Hi everyone, and welcome to the very last part of our Unit 7 note packet, Part 6, and our last learning target of this unit, which is Target 22. And this is all about graphing circles. So it says I can write the equation of a circle and graph a circle on the coordinate plane. And so the first thing we want to talk about, and let's just get right to it today, since this will be a little bit different. We're not really solving problems necessarily like we have in the past. This is just more of a, do we understand a circle on a coordinate plane? So again, let's just get right to it and let's talk about that equation. It's a different looking equation than really we've ever worked with before. And so here's the standard form. It's x minus h, all in parentheses, squared, plus y minus k in parentheses squared. And that equals r squared. All right, so now let's talk about what we get out of this equation. Remember, let me erase some of this stuff up here so I have a little bit more space to work with. Remember, there are important things in a circle, and the most important things essentially are our center and our radius. Because remember, the definition of a circle is all the set of points that are equidistant from some center. And that distance is what our radius is called. And then obviously our center kind of like centers our shape. It tells you where it goes, right? And so that's what our equation is telling us. It tells us our center and it tells us our radius, as long as we know how to read it. And so our center is a point, an x value and a y value. And they come from the two parenthesis pieces here. And so our center will be h comma k. And so I'll circle those. Our center is this number and that number. But notice there's a minus in between there. And so our center is generally opposite of what we see. If we see a minus a number, then our center is the positive version of that number. If we see plus a number, our center is the negative version of that number. And you will see that a whole bunch in the next four examples. And then our radius is obviously r, right? And it deals with this r squared piece. Notice our radius is not r squared. And so for us to figure out our radius, we need to take the square root of what our circle equation equals every time, right? And then the x and the y in our parenthesis parts, I don't want to confuse this too much, but that stands for just any point on the circle. And so we'll use that a little later on in this lesson, but for now our focus is on the equation and can we figure out center and radius, and then also work forwards and backwards. So if we know the center and radius, can we write the equation? And so let's practice that here. Let's start with A. So we see an x minus 4 and a y plus 2 in our parentheses. Remember, that's where our center comes from. And so it deals with these numbers right here. And remember, our center is going to be opposite of those numbers that we see. Our x value of our center will come from the x parentheses. The y value will come from the y. And so since we see a minus 4 in the x, our center is positive 4 for an x value. And we see a plus 2 in the y, and so our center is minus 2 for the y value. Again, it's just essentially opposite of what we see in each of those sets of parentheses. And then our radius, remember, deals with the number that it equals, but it equals r squared. And so if we want a radius, we square root that number. So we square root 25, which means our radius is 5. All right, let's keep practicing. So now let's move to B. In B, we see a minus 5 and a plus 2 in the x and the y set of parentheses. And so since we see a minus 5 in the x, our center x value is positive 5. So if we see a plus 2 in the y, it is negative 2. And then again, our radius is the square root of the number we see. We see r squared, and we want r, so square root of 16 is 4. Let's keep going. Center, remember, opposite of what we see in the x and the y parentheses. So we see a plus 2. So our center is at -2. We see a -6, so it's at +6. And then our radius is the square root of the number at the end. Square root of 36 is 6. All right, lastly, center, x value should be -3, y value should be +4. And then radius is the square root of 4, which is 2. All right. Now, hopefully that makes some sense. And if you're feeling good about that, that's perfect. In the next example, we'll work backwards. So remember, our standard form is x minus h squared, don't forget the squared, plus y minus k squared, and then that equals r squared. Do not forget the squares, right? They are a crucial part here. Except for in the r squared part, since it'll just be a number, right, we can actually just square that and write the number. So here we go. Remember, our x value and our y value of our center go to the minus h and minus k part, which makes them opposite, right? Because if we're working with a center here, h comma k, we get x, and we want to do x minus -4. And so minus -4 is like x plus 4, right? And then squared. And then we'll do plus, and then we get to the y part. And so it's y, and it's -2, right? Squared. And then that'll equal 3 squared, but we can write just 9 if we would like, right? And so there's the equation of our circle. Now, let's do B. Remember, our center is our h and k, and we always do an x minus and a y minus those numbers, and it always turns them opposite. And so we have an h and minus -3, which means +3. And then we'll do plus, and then we'll get our y. It'll be y minus -5, so that becomes y plus 5. Remember to keep adding your squares, and then it equals 1 squared, right? And 1 squared is just 1. All right, now we see some zeros here. And so we're going to take this step by step. These are our zeros, right? These are zeros. So there are h and our k. And so we're going to have x minus 0 squared plus y minus 0 squared. And that's going to equal our radius, which is 10 squared. Now, you won't ever see -0. It's not wrong to put -0, but if I subtract 0 from things, right, things just don't change. 5 minus 0, 5. 10 minus 0, 10, and so on. And so when we have a -0, basically what they're going to do is just drop the 0 part, because whatever x is -0 stays x. And so they'll write this as x squared only. You won't see the 0. You'll just have to know it means 0, but because it means 0, we don't actually need it because it doesn't change any value, so we just kind of take it away. And then the same thing will happen with the y, right? Y minus 0 is still just y. And so it'll be x squared plus y squared, and that'll equal, and 10 squared is 100. And so we definitely need to have that conversation, because this is what you'll see whenever you get a 0 for your h and k. They just don't write 0, they'll just have that individual thing squared by itself. And that's what we'll see in D as well, right? Because we'll have an x minus 0 squared, because our h is 0. Now we'll do a plus, and we'll have a y, and that's a +4, so we need a -4 in here, squared, and that equals 7 squared. But again, we can rewrite this in a different way, because we don't need this x minus 0, we will just see x squared. They'll drop the -0 part. Now, the y this time is not a 0, so it stays like that. So plus, and y minus 4 in parentheses, squared, and then it equals, and 7 squared is 49. And so this would be our final answer for part D. All right. So we've worked forwards and backwards, all regarding the equation of a circle. And remember, equation of the circle deals with center and radius. That's the most crucial parts. So what if they graph a circle on a grid? Can we find center and radius? And if we do, then we should be able to write the equation. And so we wanted to literally, when we're looking for center, is think, okay, what's the dead center of this circle? And I would say that the center of this circle is the dot in the center of that middle square, unit square, right? Now notice the graph scale. It's counting by twos every tick mark, which means halfway there is like 1, right? And then we get to 2, which makes this half 3. And then this line is 4, and then 5, and so on. And it's doing the same thing on the y-axis, right? If every line is 2, then halfway between every line is a 1. So 1 to 2, and then halfway here is 3, then on the line is 4, and 5, and so on. And that's important to see because it looks like our center is kind of floating in the middle of nowhere. But once we put these marks on, we'll see that our center is sitting at 3, 3, right? The 0.33. All right, so we stated the center. Now our radius is going to be how far away from the center till I hit the edge of the circle. And so if I look at this green line here, we just want to know how far is that? Well, since the circle rests on the x-axis, we can kind of just count, right? And so that circle is sitting at a y value of 3. So down 1, 2, 3 till I hit that x-axis. And so my radius is just 3. And so now that I've got my center and my radius, I can write my equation. Remember, center is h and k. And we're going to do the opposite of those numbers in our equation. So it'll be x minus 3 squared plus, and then y minus 3 squared. And it always equals your radius squared. So it'll equal 3 squared, which is 9, right? And so then that's our equation. And that's literally the equation of that circle. And we got it by analyzing center and radius. So let's keep doing that. We'll move on to B. We got to find the center of this circle. It's kind of hard to see. To me, I think I can see it right here. It's resting on the x-axis, right? And it is, right there. I think that's where I visualize this. Now, notice that center, we need to look at our units again, right? Every box, we're counting by twos. Now, that's to the left. So if 0 is right at our origin, that's sitting at -2, right? And since it's on our x-axis, the y value is 0. So our center is sitting at -2 for our x, 0 for our y. Now, we need to figure out our radius. And so we got to find our center, which, right, is the green, now red dot. And then how far is it till we hit the edge of the circle? And so you can just go in any direction. I would say the best directions are to follow lines. So up, down, left, or right. If I look this way, right, till I hit the edge of the circle, that's at +2. I started at -2. So how far is that distance? Well, it's 2 to get to 0, 2 more to get to the other 2. So it is 4 units total. That means our radius is 4. And so now we can write the equation. Remember h comma k, and we're always opposite in our equation. And so we'll do x plus 2 squared, and then plus, and then y minus 0 squared, and that equals our radius squared. Now I'm going to do this one in 2 parts so we can handle the y minus 0 part. So x plus 2 stays as is, but we don't need a minus 0, so we'll just get a plus a y squared by itself, and then 4 squared is 16. And that's our final answer for our equation. All right, I'm getting close to running out of time here with this video. And so I'm going to cut this video short now, and we will finish this up in the next one. Thank you very much for your time.